as both a born-again radical feminist, very much so, and the mother of a gender non-conforming daughter living under male supremacy. And I'd like to start out by reading part of this letter written anonymously for The Guardian. And it's called A Letter to My Little Girl Who Thinks She's a Boy. You soon started to say that because you liked the boys' things, you must be a boy. You wanted to cut off your hair, refused to wear dresses, and made puking faces if someone offered you something pink. I didn't mind, I let you. My sisters and I had done similar things as children. I don't disagree with you openly when you say you're a boy either. I know you're too young to really understand the complex reasons why girls and boys are supposed to act, dress, and feel differently in our society. You're not feminine. That's what you mean. But then, over the last few years, I started reading about gender and getting scared for your future. You see, it's now controversial for me to say that, contrary to your opinion, I know you're not a boy. There are a lot of voices out there on the internet who want to disagree. They will tell you the opposite, and they are becoming more mainstream every day. They are convincing young people who are vulnerable that they can do the biologically impossible, change sex. What if you become that dangerous thing? A teenager who feels she doesn't fit in her own body. As a teacher, I see this with teenagers every day, manifesting in anorexia and self-harm. We recognize that this view of the body is pathological. Although apparently, as far as their gender identity is concerned, the opinion of teenagers is all-powerful. So what if you become convinced that your particular body is wrong? Soon, from the vulnerable age of 16, you will be able to start down a road with serious drugs that will alter you forever, drugs that will make you infertile, surgery that will cause side effects for the rest of your life, and various liberal parts of society will call me an abusive parent for disagreeing with all of this. I look at you, your perfect body. I can't bear the idea that someone may try to convince you that you're in the wrong one just because you like dinosaurs and pirates and hitting things with sticks. I hug you and whisper to you as I've done since you were born 5 years ago. You are my perfect girl. My girl. Nothing can change that. The mother who wrote this letter has been called a cunt, an abusive mother, gross, a TERF, and transphobic on social media. But this mother has reason to be afraid for her child. There may be overwhelming social pressure on her gender non-conforming daughter as she gets older to become a permanent medical patient just because her personality doesn't fit into the feminine gender box. And this is exactly what happened to my child, my strong, vibrant, gender non-conforming daughter. I've always been extremely proud of my daughter. She's always had this bold, wild child personality, this booming voice, and much deeper and louder than mine. You know, she did not get my voice, and I adore her voice. And she's always loved insects and reptiles. Always been always a fearless bull. I call her my little bull. And when she was little, I always had, rubber snakes and rubber lizards in my purse. She wanted nothing to do with princesses and dolls. She had no interest in any of that at all. And I raised her to be proud of her female body. I told her what her vulva was and the different parts of her body, her clitoris and vagina and urethra. And she was very proud of how her body worked. And she was proud of what her body would be able to do when she got what we called the good blood. And she knew that when she got the good blood, she'd be able to create life in her body. And she thought of this as a kind of superpower.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
And she was excited when she got the good blood. She was thrilled. She was only 10 years old, and we celebrated, and she was really proud of herself. But that pride did not last. My daughter rapidly began to develop breasts and other curves that drew the terrifying attention of adult men. my bold, adventuresome daughter, who always thought the world was her oyster, began to experience street harassment, catcalls, and sexual threats. There were several instances when she was only 11 years old, and she came home from school shaken because men had shouted things about her body from their cars. There was a family acquaintance who tried to kiss her when he caught her alone, and she didn't tell me about this for months, but would hide in her room when he came over. There was also a devastating comment from a formerly trusted male relative made in front of her a few weeks before she decided to transition. He said he could understand why men commit rape because women are so sexy. Yeah. And it seems everywhere we went, a man felt a need to comment on how my daughter looked, which made her feel extremely self-conscious, uncomfortable, and absolutely unsafe. And my daughter stopped showering. She started wearing baggy clothes and covering her face with her long tangled hair. She began to hide herself. And it was shortly after her 13th birthday when she told me she was really a boy and couldn't possibly be a girl. And who could blame her? She was a smart, strong, brave young woman, and she saw the writing on the wall. Before puberty, she would joke about the pressures placed on women and girls. And, you know, I kind of jokingly expressed concern before she started middle school that, you know, she'd feel pressured to start acting like a Barbie girl. And she kind of laughed at that and put her hand on her hip and rolled her eyes, as she does to me frequently, and said, "Yeah, Mom, I can't wait to get in touch with my inner plastic doll." However, that pressure was a lot more overwhelming than a little girl could anticipate. And it was everywhere. At a bus stop near our home that my daughter walked past every day, there was a poster of a teenage girl simulating fellatio on a popsicle. There was a billboard near our home showing a topless teenage girl, her hair covering her breasts and her bare legs spread wide. There was another of a young woman at one of the bus stops with her ass bared, wearing a thong, smiling over her shoulder at the camera. You know, magazines in the checkout line, fast food commercials, perfume ads, clothing commercials, everywhere. She would see semi-naked women in humiliating poses that no self-respecting man would be caught dead in. So my daughter had a hard time avoiding the conclusion, it's hard to avoid this conclusion if you're a young woman in this culture, that her primary function was as a sex toy. And if she couldn't accept being a sex toy, she'd have to accept being invisible. And my daughter refused. She decided if that's what a woman was, then she must really be a man. As she began to withdraw into depression, she spent more and more time seeking refuge in online forums. And transgender forums have become extremely popular on social media. And where my daughter connected with other gender non-conforming children or kids was on Tumblr. And with the encouragement of her online teenage peers, she began to bind her breasts and started talking about wanting to take testosterone, and said that she wanted to have her breasts cut off. And I was petrified. I was absolutely petrified. I did research and learned that testosterone has actually been proven to cause heart, muscle, and liver disease at a young age. And the thought of her mutilating her perfectly healthy body, you know, by getting a medically unnecessary double mastectomy, absolutely broke my heart. I mean, when you raise children, you want to protect their bodies and nurture their bodies. And here, just blooming into adulthood, my daughter was wanting to cut the breasts off. And I just found that absolutely devastating. But everything I've read or heard about transgender children is if you don't support their gender identity, that they're going to kill themselves, they're going to commit suicide. So I felt that I just had to support this, or I was going to harm my child. I didn't feel like I was allowed to express grief or loss or fear or skepticism. And the only other parents I read about or saw on TV were the good parents that were all, encouraging their child's transition and enthusiastic about it. And, I got a lot of support from people for supporting my daughter's gender identity. Everyone said, "Oh, you're such a cool mom for supporting your son." But I was in anguish. I was in absolute misery. But I didn't feel free to express this. I thought, I'm going to hurt her if I express this. And so thinking I was doing the right thing, I took her to a clinic specifically for LGBT kids. And the doctor at the clinic, who was very well-meaning, never questioned my 13-year-old child's self-diagnosis that she was transgender, never questioned that. She didn't refer us to a therapist to help us determine if something else might be going on. She just accepted it. She diagnosed herself with sex dysphoria as transgender, and that's the way it is. And, no one at the clinic, none of the counselors, not her doctor, no one encouraged her at all to accept her biological sex. That accepting and embracing her body as it is would actually be more beneficial to her than becoming a lifelong medical patient. And no one questioned the unprovable idea that she was internally male. And to live an authentic life, she'd have to be on hormones and have drastic surgery. I mean, the contradiction in that is absurd. To be authentic, she'd have to be on hormones forever and surgically mutilate herself. And another issue I have with this is, how does a teenager back out of that? Teenagers have such a deep need for belonging. And my daughter, as a gender non-conforming child, teenager, found belonging in the transgender community. And it became very important to her sense of belonging to say, yeah, I'm a boy, I'm transgender. She changed her name, she, insisted on male pronouns, she said she was going to transition. And how do you back out of that if your entire peer group, all your sense of belonging is based on this identity that you've claimed at such a vulnerable age? In my daughter's case, she actually lost her peer group. She gradually withdrew from them as she started to get older. She no longer sees any of the friends she made when she was claiming to be a boy. She's, they didn't even have a chance to reject her. She was ashamed to tell them that she had changed her mind. And she still struggles with feeling like she's a traitor to the trans community because she decided not to transition. She feels like a traitor because she decided not to have her breasts cut off and not to go on hormones. And it's a very painful position for a young person to be in. And this is why I also seriously question the trend of making celebrities out of transgender children. I'm concerned about, Jazz is a very famous transgender child, famous only for being transgender. How do you let that go? There's an industry being built around Jazz now because Jazz is going to have her own reality show. So where does this child have the space to change her mind? Imagine the pressure against her being able to say, I think I'm just a really, really feminine male. I think I'm just a male who wants to wear dresses and curl his hair. There's no space for Jazz to do that. None. But now Jazz is an industry. And it seems incredibly unfair. But my daughter did resist the pressure to transition, even though I completely swallowed the transgender party line. I was actually afraid not to. I really was afraid she was going to harm herself or feel like she couldn't turn to me anymore if I didn't support this. But she outgrew this need. As she got older and stronger in herself, she claimed the right to be who she was in her healthy female body, which I am so grateful for.
Oh my God, yeah.
And the only boundary I set with her, the only boundary I could set, I said no hormones, no surgery, nothing until you're 18. And frankly, I would have stopped her at 18 if I'd had the legal power to do so. But I said nope, you got to be 18. So that gave her the time to outgrow this. But recently, just last month, there was a 14-year-old girl in San Diego, 14, and she had a double mastectomy.
Oh my.
And that was celebrated in the paper, like, yay, she's claiming her male identity, she's had a double mastectomy. When my daughter was 14, she still wanted her breasts cut off. 14, she was determined, I'm getting rid of these. Now she just turned 17, and she's no longer expresses any desire to be a man. What she's done is she's claimed her lesbian identity. She's claimed her identity as a lesbian. Yes, yay, yes. And her right to live in a female body as a gender non-conforming lesbian. Yeah. But what was painful and difficult is when she was claiming to be a man, she was referred to a group at this LGBT support center. She was referred to a male support group, whereas a lesbian support group would have been so much more beneficial to her, you know.
That's so
And
crazy.
it is. And you know, today she's still struggling with some loneliness because she lost her peer group, but she does have a best friend from childhood who's also gender nonconforming lesbian and also went through a period of time where she identified as male. And at age 18, she's able to say, you know, I think I did that because I didn't have any adult female role models who were gender nonconforming. I didn't have that, so she really felt like she had to be a boy. And, you know, I really think we're failing gender nonconforming kids by encouraging them to surgically and chemically alter themselves to conform to society's expectations of how males and females are supposed to behave. What I would love to see happen is for us to let kids know that your biology should never be allowed to place limits on your personality, your sexuality, or your self-expression. And I do worry about gender nonconforming kids becoming lifelong medical patients because of the mainstreaming of transgender ideology. And I want to leave you with the question, why is surgically and hormonally altering children's bodies easier for people to accept than the fact that gender is a form of oppression that harms everyone? That's all.